Hello, everybody, and welcome to nutrition. Today, we're going to just do an introduction to nutrition and kind of allow us to apply this then to understanding how nutrition can interplay with exercise, fitness, and general health. So let's get started. If you're following along in the textbook, you can, take a look at chapter 1 in the textbook, and that should kind of go right along with the information that I'll cover in this lecture. Okay, so what is nutrition? Nutrition is the science of food, the nutrients, and the substances therein, their action, interaction, balance, and relation to health and disease, and the process by which the human organism ingests, digests, absorbs, transports, utilizes, and excretes food substances. So when we think about nutrition, really it's pretty darn complicated, right? So it is pretty darn science heavy, and we're really interested in understanding the physiology of how we take food and break it down, and also the biochemistry of how we can take those molecules, manipulate them, transfer them into various forms in order for us to do so many different processes within the body. So when we think about nutrition and how this relates to our general health, again, this is a topic that we're constantly learning about in terms of gaining an overall understanding of the interplay between what we eat and how we feel and how we function from a physiological perspective. So, as I kind of mentioned, nutrition is really a form of applied biochemistry and the physiology of digestion. So, when we think about nutrition, it's really the mixture of these two things. So, physiology of digestion means how does it work to take the foods, break them down in our mouth by chewing, swallow them. They'll go to the stomach where they're going to be broken down further into smaller pieces. They'll move to the small intestines, then we'll absorb some of those molecules into the blood. And then applied biochemistry is our ability to transfer those molecules into various configurations from a chemical perspective. So again, a lot going on kind of at that microscopic level in terms of allowing us to understand how we can manipulate these molecules from a biochemical perspective. Right now, purposes in this class, our goal is to just kind of get a general understanding of how all of this works together in order for us to use food and use it to kind of the best of our abilities. So in this class, again, our goal is to understand proper nutritional habits. And again, this is something that is kind of constantly evolving. I've been doing a lot of reading here recently about processed foods and how, our body can process those in a different way than say like our fresh fruits and vegetables and things like that. So again, when I think about understanding proper nutritional habits, know that this is constantly evolving, and I want you to kind of be good consumers in the real world in terms of what it is that we're eating. Okay. Number two, we want to have an opportunity to analyze our own nutritional decisions. So again, we're going to do a couple different diet analyses in this class, and my goal with those is to allow us to have space to kind of reflect on what we're doing and be able to then better ourselves because of that. And then lastly, we want to reduce our personal risk for many of these common health problems associated with bad nutrition, right? So again, if we can kind of clean up what we're eating and work to improve in those regards, how does that impact our health kind of in the long run? And again, that's something that we want to really dive into in this class. So to give us a kind of a basis to start with here, what are some of the classes and sources of nutrients? So what are our three macronutrients? Macro means big. So macronutrients we need in large quantities. And our macronutrients include carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Okay, so our three basic macronutrients, again, are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Okay, micronutrients, micro means small. However, that doesn't mean that these are less important. It just means that we need them in like smaller quantities, essentially. So our micronutrients include vitamins and minerals. Okay, so micronutrients are vitamins and minerals, and then water is our sixth nutrient. If we look at these in terms of kind of our six different classifications. Now, sometimes water is kind of put in with those micronutrients because water is kind of going to move alongside with some of them. However, we need water in large quantities. So water can kind of go in its own category, in my opinion. But again, our 6 nutrients that are important for us, and again, these are essential that we get regularly in our diets, include proteins, fats, carbs for our macros, and vitamins and minerals for those micronutrients, and then water is our 6th nutrient. So which nutrients do what? So number one, which nutrients are going to provide us with energy in the form of calories? This will come from those 3 macronutrients that we mentioned. That is carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Each of those is going to provide us with calories, and they're going to provide us with varying amounts of calories. So carbohydrates are going to give us 4 calories per gram. Proteins are going to give us about 4 calories per gram. And fats are going to give us 9 calories per gram. So again, when we think about the overall implications of consuming a lot of fats, it's easy for us to overconsume calories because a gram of fat is significantly more calorie dense in comparison to the other 2 options. Okay, which nutrients do building and repair? Building and repair will be done with our proteins and our minerals. Again, our proteins are going to kind of serve as the basis for many of our building processes within the body. And then minerals such as phosphorus are going to also play an important role in establishing kind of a meshwork or scaffolding for us to kind of have some of these building processes occur. And then lastly, which of our nutrients are going to regulate body processes? This will come from our water, vitamins, and minerals. And again, lucky for you, we'll cover each of these nutrients in kind of one different lecture throughout the class. So we'll get an opportunity to kind of do a deep dive and understand these in significantly more detail. Okay, so again, as we kind of already mentioned, and this should be a little review, nutrients that the body needs in large quantities are macronutrients, and these will come from our carbohydrates, our fats, and our proteins. Okay, micronutrients, again, are just as important as the macronutrients. We just need them in small quantities, and our micronutrients will include vitamins and minerals. Okay. Again, when we think about each of these nutrients, it's important that we get enough, but also not too much, right? So again, we need them all within this kind of this specific small window, right? So having too little of certain nutrients can lead to deficiencies. So for example, like if I don't have enough iron in my diet, that would lead to a deficiency known as iron deficiency, or it could be anemia. Okay, and too much can cause toxic effects, right? So again, if I overconsume sodium or salt, for example, that can lead to hypertension or high blood pressure. And generally speaking, if I overconsume calories, that can lead to the toxic effect known as obesity, right? So again, we've got to think about how can we manage our needs within this narrow window and make sure we're getting enough, but not too much of each of these molecules. And what's kind of crazy is like we're pretty darn good at it, right? So we're pretty darn good at being able to maintain our general health without really even thinking about it, right? So again, we're able to kind of manage how many calories we consume in terms of, allowing us to like maintain a body weight, and also a lot of these micronutrients. So calcium, iron, sodium, right? We're able to kind of self-regulate and keep ourselves within this kind of narrow window. But again, we'll talk about how we can kind of optimize this window in order for us to kind of optimize our overall health. So ways to obtain what's known as the RDA. Okay, so the RDA is the recommended daily allowance, or how much do I need in any given day, right? So in order for us to meet this, we need to eat a variety of foods. And note that 3 key concepts for healthy living include balance, variety, and moderation, right? So when we think about kind of improving your health and your nutrition, again, think of this as really a process, right? Not a means to an end, but more of a process that I'm constantly working on. Like, what can I do today better than what I did yesterday, right? So, and again, I think if you approach it in that way, it doesn't seem so overwhelming, right? Because each of us are coming with kind of different issues and different goals. And so if you kind of think about like, okay, yesterday I had 3 brownies and a Diet Coke, like what could I do better today? We can kind of think about that as just a one day at a time kind of process, and thinking about how can I make small changes each day to equate to a larger change over time. Okay, so again, balance. So consuming a good balance of different types of foods, right? So fruits, vegetables, meats, all of those things, we want to kind of keep those in balance. Variety. So the greater the variety of the calories that we're consuming, look at what I brought for my lunch, or part of my lunch, I should say. I brought a bag of mixed vegetables, and I have a little dish of hummus to go with it. And again, just a nice variety there. I've got tomatoes, I've got yellow peppers, I've got snap peas, I've got some cauliflower and cucumbers in there. So a nice variety of different nutrients in there. And again, each of those is going to give me something different that I need for the day. So the more variety that we can have, the better off we are, right? So again, maybe I'm going to have that today. Tomorrow, I'm going to have something totally different in the veggie category. So again, good variety is going to help us to maintain our health. And then moderation, right? So I made the example of I had 3 brownies yesterday. Okay. Well, I'm not going to ever tell you to not have brownies, but like maybe 2 would have been better, or maybe just 1, right? So again, we could think about moderation. I don't want you to just like eliminate something from your diet, especially if you like really love brownies, then let's not eliminate that. But how can we eat brownies in moderation and not have 3 every single day, in terms of allowing us to kind of maintain our overall health? You know what I like cannot resist? This is really weird, but those little like robin eggs that you get at Easter time. I'm not a big candy person, but man, those little they're like malted chocolate eggs, and they have like a hard shell on the outside. Oh my gosh, I could just eat those nonstop. I just love those. And so like moderation isn't an option for those. It's like, okay, have 1 bag and then that's it for the year, right? So again, thinking about how can we improve our moderation, right? So what can we do to make sure that we're not kind of overdoing it in any kind of category or area? So we think about what does that look like, right? So what is normal and how much should we be consuming? So when we think about breaking down those macronutrients, this is just one model. And we'll talk more detail about this as we get to each of these macronutrients, but carbs should be 55 to 65% of our total calories, maybe more like 45 to 65 is the RDA, but this is just one example. Fats are going to be 25 to 30%, and proteins more like 10 to 15%. Again, might be more than that, maybe more like 20% for the proteins, again, depending on our goals with our nutrition. Okay, so with carbohydrates, again, we are going to kind of take a look at some of the chemical or the biochemical configuration of each of these molecules. But carbohydrates are going to be 4 calories per gram, and we can divide them into 2 categories. We have simple sugars, also known as our monosaccharides, which I'm going to show you on our next slide. And our complex carbohydrates are going to be made up of multiple small sugar molecules linked together. Okay. And our 3 monosaccharides are glucose, fructose, and galactose. And I'm going to show you what those look like on the next slide here. So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so here you can see what these molecules, what these monosaccharides look like from a biochemical perspective. And I'm not going to test you on this or anything. I just want you to appreciate really how similar each of these molecules look. And that'll be important when we talk about our amino acids and our proteins, because those look pretty darn different. But here you can see glucose, galactose kind of have that same setup, right? So again, we've got the same kind of configuration here. Fructose looks a little more like a house, so a little bit different than glucose and galactose, but really not too far off either when we think about this from a biochemical perspective. And again, this will be important when we then talk about what's happening with our amino acids. So here, check out glucose and galactose. The only difference here is on this carbon, the configuration of the H molecule and the OH here are flipped over, but otherwise it's pretty darn the same, right? So again, very, very similar in terms of their biochemical perspectives. This shows you kind of what a bigger chain or a complex carbohydrate might look like. So again, you can see each of these simple sugars kind of linked together, and that will create a complex carbohydrate or a polysaccharide where I have multiple simple sugars kind of linked together. Okay, moving forward, let's take a look at lipids. So lipids are made of the same chemical configuration of carbohydrates, but they have different linkages. Okay, so how are fats different? Again, they contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. However, our lipids are going to contain significantly more hydrogen in comparison to what we saw with the carbohydrates. Okay, so a triglyceride is our most common form of lipid, and it's going to be made up of a glycerol backbone and 3 fatty acid tails. That's where it gets its name. Tri means 3, so it's got 3 fatty acids hooked onto a glycerol backbone. Okay. Now, when we think about fats, they can come in multiple forms. They can be unsaturated or saturated in nature. And essentially what that means is it has to do with the hydrogen bonds, right? So again, for the saturated fats, all of the carbon bonds are going to have a hydrogen molecule linked to them. And with our unsaturated fats, not every bond is linked with a hydrogen molecule. Okay, so let me kind of show you what this looks like. So from a chemical perspective, a carbon molecule has 4 bonds, okay? And each bond needs to be filled, right? So each bond has to have something on it in order for the carbon to like be happy, basically. So in a saturated fat, I have hydrogen here. Sorry, I'm not a good little artist with my little pen here. And I'm going to have like a chain of carbons like this. So then same thing, like each of these carbons needs to have all 4 of its bonds filled with H's. Okay, so with saturated fats, each of these carbons are fully bound with hydrogen molecules. Okay, now with unsaturated, there's not enough hydrogen available. And so what happens is we create double bonds. So this little guy up here, instead of having a hydrogen kind of linked on him, he does something else. So I'm going to erase this. Okay. And this bond from up top then is going to create a double bond because we can't leave the bonds unfolded or unfilled. Okay. So again, we create a double bond here, and that's what happens when we have unsaturated fats, right? There's not enough hydrogens essentially. And that's really the chemical difference. Now we think about these from a health perspective. We know that saturated fats are unhealthy in comparison to unsaturated fats are going to be a healthier option. Okay. And more to come on that. Okay, so here you go. This is better than what I could draw. So here you can see up top, these are all saturated, right? So each of these carbon bonds is filled with a hydrogen molecule, right? And down here, you can see that we're missing 2 hydrogen molecules, creating this double bond here, okay? And again, this is unsaturated down here because I don't have every single bond filled with hydrogen. And up here, these are saturated. Okay, so moving forward to take a look at proteins. Proteins are unique because now we add in another element, right? So we said that carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen were going to be found in both carbohydrates and fats. And now we're adding nitrogen into the mix as well. Okay, so proteins we know are the main structural material found in the body. They're also going to be important for making enzymes and immune factors. And proteins are going to be formed by linking amino acids together. Okay, so each protein has an option of 20 different amino acids. So we have 9 essential and 11 non-essential amino acids. Think of these as kind of like 20 different colors of beads. Okay. And if I want to make a necklace, I can use any beads that I want in any kind of configuration that I want. And that's kind of how we create a protein is we're going to take all these little amino acids. So each bead represents one amino acid and they're all different colors. Okay. Because we have 9 types of essential and 11 non-essential, and we can put them in different orders, different amounts, different patterns in order for us to kind of create this protein. So like there's so many options in terms of how we can form a protein based on these amino acids and kind of how we arrange them. So that's kind of cool. So more to come on proteins and how we kind of arrange these amino acids as well. Okay. And now I mentioned that with our monosaccharides or our simple sugars, that those look super similar from a chemical perspective. Check out how different some of these amino acids look like. Okay, so here you can see alanine and phenylalanine, for example. Look how different these are. This one has like a little drawing with it. So again, they're super different in terms of their setup. And that's kind of cool. Again, I just wanted to kind of compare and contrast that with what we saw with those monosaccharides or those simple sugars, because these are pretty darn different. And again, that's kind of why we have essential versus non-essential. More to come on that when we get to our protein unit. Okay, so we think about vitamins. Vitamins are going to contain elements of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. What are the functions of our vitamins? Vitamins are going to do all sorts of stuff. Okay, so they're going to be essential nutrients that are needed in small amounts just for us to kind of maintain general health and normal functioning. So they're going to play a vital role in many body processes, including the immune function, energy production, bone health, and nerve function. Okay, so they're going to be really essential for a lot of different things, and each of them is going to be different in terms of kind of how they contribute to our kind of overall health. Okay, so we have water soluble and fat soluble vitamins, and essentially, like this just tells us where those vitamins like to hang out. So, water soluble vitamins like to be kind of dissolved in water. Okay, so they're going to be found in kind of some like fluid types of things, and they will easily be carried in our blood and can be eliminated like in our urine because those are kind of like watery substances. So, they have no problem like living in those watery substances. And then we also have fat soluble vitamins. Um, our fat soluble vitamins are E, D, A, and K. So A, D, E, and K are our fat soluble vitamins. And fat soluble vitamins like to kind of hang out in fat, right? So again, they're going to be consumed in foods that are fatty. So for example, like avocados and eggs are going to have kind of some natural fats to them. And so these fat soluble vitamins are going to hang out there. They're also going to be able to kind of be stored a little bit easier within the body because we can store them in the fat that we have in our body because they feel safe and comfortable kind of living in that environment. Okay. Our minerals are inorganic substances. They're simple structures. They're going to have a large diversity in terms of what they can do. So they're critical in functioning for the nervous system, cellular processes, water balance, and structural systems. So again, they're pretty darn diverse in their jobs, but they are going to play an important role in kind of allowing us to maintain our general health. So it is important that we are consuming them every single day. Okay. And water is chemically composed of hydrogen and oxygen, so H2O. So it's got 2 hydrogen molecules linked onto 1 oxygen molecule. And actually about 60% of the human body is going to be made up of water. And if you're an athlete, maybe even more than that. So people that are highly trained are going to have a little bit more water mass to them in comparison to non-water mass. And functions of our water include transporting nutrients and waste, temperature regulation. So again, we can sweat to get out heat. We can also pull that water to our core to maintain our core temp if it's cold out as well. So going to be really important there. And then also some chemical processes that we'll talk about as we head into our metabolism unit here in a couple days. Okay, alcohol. Again, this is a college class, so I would be out of my mind to not mention the calories associated with alcohol. Again, this is not an essential nutrient because it's not required for us to maintain normal functioning. People can live their entire lives without ever consuming alcohol and be completely healthy. However, it does serve as a major calorie contributor for many adults, so it is definitely worth talking about and mentioning. It accounts for 7 calories per gram. So again, it's a little bit more calorie dense in comparison to proteins and carbohydrates. However, it does fall just below what we saw with our fats. And again, alcoholic beverages not only can contain alcohol, they also contain like usually carbohydrates as well. So again, if you're going to consume like a beer or wine, those are going to have sugars in them as well, in addition to the calories coming from alcohol. Okay. And maybe you're thinking like, oh, well, I drink liquor. And so like I'm not consuming as many calories. And that's actually not true. So like a shot of like whiskey, for example, is almost the same calorie content as one beer. So again, like I encourage you when we do our diet analysis to take a look at calories, if you are somebody that drinks alcohol, and kind of take a look at, what are we consuming and how much is all of this? And because it does add up, right? Also, if you're consuming, liquor, for example, are you drinking like a rum and a Coke, right? So again, I'm getting the calories from the rum, so that's 120 calories, and I have a Coke, well, that's 120 calories. Well, that's a 240 calorie drink, right? If you have several of those, that really adds up over the night. So again, thinking about those calories and how they contribute to our overall calorie intake is really important when we think about our general health. So not going to ignore it. We'll talk more about it in this class, but really I want you to take a look at that stuff. Again, I'm not saying to not drink. I enjoy wine and beer as much as anyone else, but we need to kind of be aware of that, and we need to kind of take a look at that and understand, how is that contributing to our calorie intake. Okay. So we think about nutrient composition of our diets in the human body, right? So quantities and proportions of various nutrients consumed by the individual depend on a lot of factors, right? Our social setting, right? So again, if you're out with your friends, how does that impact what you eat versus if you stay home for the night? Culture and customs, right? So again, how did you grow up? What's a normal day for you in terms of nutrition, kind of based on those traditions that you grew up with. Food cost. Notoriously, we know that people coming from lower income environments are significantly more likely to make unhealthy food choices. And again, part of that is food cost, right? It's cheaper for us to eat junk food, or that's the common conception in comparison to buying organic and salads and fresh fruits and all that stuff. It's very expensive. So thinking about food costs and how that impacts our ability to get quality food, right? Education, occupation, and income. Okay, so the higher our education and the higher our income, the more likely it is that we make healthy choices with our foods. And again, probably related a little bit to availability, right? So again, if I have a high income, I can afford to buy organic, and I can afford to buy salads, and I can afford to go out to eat, and those types of things, right? Occupation, right? So again, thinking about like, do you work in a job where you can have a sit down lunch, or are you a nurse and you're on your feet all the time and you don't really have time to eat lunch, and so then when you eat, you're just absolutely starving and you're going to grab whatever you can grab. So how does your occupation influence what and when you eat? Routines and habits. So again, we'll talk in this class, how can we establish healthy habits? Because once you make a habit, that really increases your likelihood of kind of sticking with that plan. So we've got to think about those little elements and how can I change my habits to make myself healthier, right? Lifestyle health knowledge. So again, understanding what is healthy and kind of how to approach that. Food marketing. Again, if you see a commercial for something, does that make you want to go get that thing? Food availability. Again, if those Cadbury eggs are available to me, I'm going to eat them, right? If they're there, I'm going to eat them. If there's junk food available, I'm going to eat it. However, if there's no junk food in my house, it's not available. I really have to think if I'm going to go out and buy something like that. Activity level will certainly play a role in how much and how often I'm consuming calories. Food flavor, texture, and appearance preferences, all of that stuff makes a difference in terms of how much and how often I'm eating. So we've talked about, some of the factors that might influence what choices we make from a nutritional perspective. But when we think about why is good nutrition important, again, I think that, our overarching and most important factor is it has a huge impact on our general health, and our well-being and our energy levels, and just really impacts how we feel. So good nutrition is important for prevention of disease. We can use it as kind of a medicine for different disease and different conditions as well. Good nutrition can help us in sport performance, can help us with weight management. So again, lots of reasons why good nutrition is important. And again, that doesn't even start to tap into some of the psychological benefits of eating healthy, and kind of how does that make us feel, and how does that impact our mental health, our confidence, some of those conditions as well. So again, we believe that nutrition is one key component in maintaining our optimal health. So we know that poor diet has been linked to an increased risk for preventable chronic disease, such as cardiovascular disease, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, certain types of cancers, and type 2 diabetes. Okay, other issues that we can see with poor nutrition, certainly obesity is a major concern. We can also look at like osteoporosis, which is low bone density. And again, we see that in our older populations. That's one example of a particular concern there. And then we can also think about like the impacts of, or the implications of obesity on like joint health, for example, low back pain, knee pain, those types of concerns when we're overweight and not really eating well. How does that impact us? Also, I think another big thing that people kind of don't put enough emphasis on is like when we eat shitty foods, like when we eat a lot of like processed fast food types of things, our level of inflammation in the body goes up a ton. And so again, how does that impact how we feel, how we look? And again, I think that the other thing that's important is the consistency over time, right? So if I eat a salad today for lunch, okay, yeah, I'm going to feel pretty good this afternoon. But really, the idea here is if I eat well day after day, week after week, month after month, my chronic effects, like how am I feeling after months of eating well, is really what we're after and really what makes a substantial difference. So, again, it's not enough to just have one healthy meal, and I think maybe that's why people don't buy into it, is because like it takes a while for that to really make a difference in terms of how we feel, how we look. Even like complexion, for example, we can think about like good complexion and things like that as it relates to good nutrition. And so again, I think that there's a lot of these factors that we don't necessarily think about, that these are connected, but really nutrition is connected to pretty much every area of our lives, which is, really powerful because we can decide what we eat, right? We are in charge of what we put into our bodies. And so, when you think about having that type of control, it's good and bad, right? It's good and bad because it's good because, wow, I can eat well and really make a difference in my long-term health and how I feel. However, that's a lot of pressure, right? Like I have to make the right choices. I have to really think about this in order for me to have a positive impact on my life kind of in the long run. So again, This is just the tip of the iceberg of some factors that I think maybe as a college student might be important for you to understand when we think about why is good nutrition important. And again, I hope in this class you take the time to really think about what things am I willing to change and what changes can I make in my diet so that I can improve my health in some regard. And again, I think we're all different in terms of what we're willing to modify and kind of where we're at and what point in our lives we're in. So again, I really hope you do take time to reflect on what you're doing and reflect on, how can I be better? How can I improve in this aspect of my life? So again, why is good nutrition important? We see it helping us regulate body temperature. It enhances our energy producing metabolic pathways. So again, what we eat and how much we eat can affect our metabolism. Increased mechanical efficiency. So again, thinking about muscle structure and function. Increased oxygen transport and delivery. Facilitate recovery following exercise. So again, we can use nutrition as a tool to help us recover from hard exercise bouts, which can in turn then improve our sport performance. We can improve acid-base balance, so again, helping us to maintain something called homeostasis within the body. Provide energy for various energy systems, enhance mental function. So again, good nutrition can enhance our cognitive function. And again, that means like your ability to retain information now, but also we can think about this in the long term. We think about dementia and Alzheimer's disease and how those are linked to like just general good nutrition and general regular physical activity and how those are important to preventing those particular diseases, right? So increase in bone mineral density and bone strength, prevent muscle damage, increase muscle and tissue growth. So I think, if you're an athlete, thinking about this, can I use good nutrition to improve my performance? Absolutely. Maybe even more important to me than improving my performance is keeping myself injury free as well, right? If I can't get to the start line, if I can't get on the court to play, then I can't have a great performance, right? So again, keeping us injury free is another factor that's important. And again, that's kind of related to that recovery mechanism. We think about the role of exercise. Okay, so again, I'm going to kind of go through here a little bit of the food guide pyramid. So this shows you what's called choosemyplate.gov, and this is our current food guide pyramid. Again, we want half of our plate to be filled with fruits and veggies. We've got proteins as about 25%, grains, and then dairy or another secondary option for proteins here, and calcium. Also, if you go to this website, there's a ton of different resources there that can give you more details about more than just what's shown here in the picture. Okay, so we know that poor diet combined with lack of physical activity accounts for 300,000 deaths per year. So again, when we think about, am I in charge of the foods and the quality and the quantity of foods that I consume as a middle class American? Yes, absolutely, right? I'm not saying everyone has complete control of that, but I personally do. Am I in control of whether or not I do physical activity and exercise regularly as a middle class American? Yes, absolutely. I have control over that. So again, we can control 300,000 of these deaths every year in our country, right? Poor diet, lack of physical activity is one of the leading causes of death in our country. And again, we're in control of these things, which is absolutely crazy. So when we think about what are we doing wrong in our country, right? So in 1999, the average American consumed 1,850 calories per day. Currently, our average calorie consumption as of 2022 is 2,150 calories per day, right? So we're consuming about 300 calories more per day than what we were in 1990, which I guess was like 30 years ago. That seems weird to me. I'm getting old. A little over 30 years ago, we've increased our calorie consumption per day by about 300 calories. Okay. Current recommendations are we should have 5 servings of fruits and vegetables per day. 42% of Americans eat less than 2% per day. Only 22% of people even eat any vegetables daily, right? So again, thinking about like that doesn't include like ketchup and pickles on your hamburger. I'm saying like, did you eat any carrots? Did you have any tomatoes? Did you have avocados, right? 22% of people are having those. That's it. That's it. The rest of us are not having any vegetables on our normal day-to-day basis. So, a lot to work on, I would say, in our country in terms of general nutrition. This is kind of interesting, when we compare ourselves to other countries. So here you can see mean calorie intake per day per capita. Here and again, this is crazy. The U.S. We are consuming significantly more than every other country shown here, right? Not a lot more than like Austria, I guess, and Italy, but still substantial difference when we look at calorie intake in comparison to everyone else. We are winning in terms of how much we consume. And it's interesting, like if you go to other countries, like for example, I was in New Zealand this last December, and just the portions that you get at the restaurants are just a night and day difference in comparison to what we have here. Like I ordered fish one of the nights that we went out to dinner. I ordered a fish entree and a glass of wine, and the fish came, and it was like this big plate full of like whatever the local fish was, and it like was covered in like this grape and walnut like chutney on top, and that was it. That was the whole meal. I bet the whole meal was probably 300 to 400 calories. So like a very, very light calorie meal in comparison to like if you ordered that in the United States, like you'd get a side of like onion rings or rice or mashed potatoes or something else with it so that you had like over, 1,000 calories easily in that particular meal. So it's just kind of interesting to see, culturally how different we are from some of these other countries. Okay, so what do Americans eat? This shows you just another statistic here, looking at 1978 in comparison to 2006. Again, no matter which kind of resource you're looking at here, we have substantially increased the number of calories we are consuming, but check out what's happening down here too, right? So we've decreased the percentage of calories that we're getting from proteins, and we have switched those out for sugars, right? So we're consuming substantially more calories coming from sugars and substantially lower amounts of proteins. Okay. Percentage of food not eaten at home. So in 1978, about 18% of their calories came from like eating out. And now we're almost up to half. So almost half of the calories that we consume is food not eaten at home. And again, we think about the cultural shifts here. What is like normal for our country in terms of like how often do we eat out? I want to say I recently read a statistic, something like we eat out 5 to 7 times per week for the average person. And again, that could be like I stopped and grabbed a coffee and a muffin this morning, and then I stopped at Casey's and had a piece of pizza for lunch. So I think both of those things would kind of count for percentage of food not eaten at home. So again, we're really kind of in our culture, we've increased the amount of calories that we're stopping and grabbing in comparison to like home cooked meals. And that would have been substantially more common in the 1900s, 1978 here. Okay, so again, here is my first plug for fruits and vegetables. And maybe you're thinking like, I just really don't like fruits and vegetables. I would encourage you to try like a lot of different ones and find out what you do like. Or, there's lots of ways we can kind of like hide these in other foods, right? So for example, like when I make spaghetti at my house, I have 3 small children. I'll like chop up spinach and I'll put it into the sauce, and they don't even know it's in there, right? So I just cook the spinach, I chop it up really small and put it in with the marinara sauce. And I don't put like a ton in, like I put like 2 cups in for the whole like big meal. But that's something, right? So we can kind of sneak in some vegetables here and there. Okay, so what are some benefits of regularly consuming fruits and vegetables, we see a reduced risk of chronic disease such as cardiovascular disease, stroke, and cancer. They're low in calories and they're high in vitamins and minerals, so a lot of good benefits that way. They're a great source of fiber, so that can improve our digestive health, decrease our risk of colon cancer, and help us with weight management. They can help us to reduce blood pressure, improve vision because they are going to be high in vitamin A. Maybe you've heard my dad always said, eat your carrots, it'll make you see good. And so that's actually pretty darn true. So we think about that, improving vision, improve bone mass. So again, just having some of those vitamins and minerals that are important in there for our bone density. Fight arthritis, improve our skin and our skin complexion, resist infection, improve our immune system. So people that regularly eat fruits and vegetables have significantly less colds cold and flus per year in comparison to those who don't. And then healthy aging and improvement of memory as well. Okay. So this is my, gosh, I don't want to do the math here. 16th year teaching in higher education, and I've done a lot of diet analyses for college students and college athletes. And one of the common concerns that I run into with a lot of college age students is that we skip breakfast. Okay, so again, this is the most common meal to skip. And some of the challenges that I hear from students are they don't have enough time. So maybe, they have an 8 a.m. class, so they have to be at work at 8 a.m. And so they just wake up and go straight there. So they don't have time to make a big breakfast before heading to school or work. They don't like breakfast food, which I think is crazy. There's nothing better, in my opinion, than like eggs and bacon or like an egg sandwich or something like that. And then eating breakfast makes me feel sick. Maybe you just don't feel like you're hungry first thing in the morning. So again, those are all common challenges that I hear about. So we do know that eating breakfast will reduce the likelihood of cravings later in the day. So again, if I can get some calories in early in the morning, that will prevent me from kind of binging at night. And it also is going to provide us with essential energy for calories to support workouts later in the day. So if you are an athlete or somebody that's physically active, again, we're going to burn a lot of calories like maybe later in the day. And so it's important that we kind of stock load our system with calories early on so that we're fueled to have a good workout later in the day. So these are just some examples of kind of winning breakfast combinations. And again, it's just something to work on, something to kind of think about. And if you're somebody that doesn't eat breakfast, maybe you start with a banana or like a granola bar and we kind of work our way up from there. And again, I want to encourage you to really think about the process and how can I choose something to focus on to improve just little by little, right? So here's some different ideas here. The first example, so again, I want to have like a fruit, a grain, and a protein for my breakfast. So here I've just got very simple banana, Cheerios, and milk. Okay, so again, we've got a nice grain. That's a pretty solid choice for a cereal option with milk and a banana. We've got whole wheat toast with eggs and blueberries. My favorite would be like a whole wheat tortilla with scrambled eggs, cheese, and then a clementine. You can also like make these ahead of time and throw them in the fridge or freezer. If you put them in the freezer and wrap them up, you could pop them in the microwave and have them ready to go when you leave. In the morning, we can do strawberries, granola, and Greek yogurt, or you could do like peanut butter on an English muffin or like a bagel with an apple as well. So just some kind of ideas to kind of get your brain rolling. And again, we'll have an opportunity to take a look at our diets throughout this class. That is it for our intro today. Hope you have a great day and reach out if you have any questions.